Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be examining the Marathon ARG that was released concurrently with the teaser trailer from last year. Specifically, I will be talking about what we learned about the UESC. This whole analysis will be about 5 videos, I think. One video for each of the prominent factions discussed throughout the ARG, and then a video that talks about my overall takeaways from the information we received. I'd like to also state that this video would not be possible without the ARG Google Doc. That's maintained by Retrocraft, Skylar K. Blue 1, and ODST Sam Owens on behalf of the Game Detectives Discord server. Also, I'd like to thank Marathon's story page maintained by Hamish Sinclair and Karnamir's Marathon Lore Archive. These videos are largely just a repackaging of the information that these individuals have painstakingly documented. I just want to put this into a digestible video format so that people can consume it in an easier way. Without their meticulous work, my videos and the community's understanding of the new lore would not be possible. So thank you to everyone involved in the documentation of this information, and thank you to Craig Tan 2455 for the comment suggesting this content. So, the UESC, or Unified Earth Space Council. The UESC is the governing body which controls the solar system housing Earth, referred to as Sol in the ARG. They have exerted control over these planets and moons since at least the 2100s through numerous military campaigns and colonial expeditions. They were the governing body which coordinated and executed the construction, deployment of the colony ship, the Marathon, which is the namesake for the original trilogy, and the ship which housed Durandal and the security officer prior to their escapades on the 4 battleship in Lahawan. They appear throughout the original trilogy to be the de facto authority for the human race, despite the vast distance that they cover. Now, the final screen of the second game, Marathon Durandal, states that once the 4 were defeated at Lahawan, the combined forces of the Svit Kur and the Earth fleet sack the 4 system in 2881. Approximately 30 years after this assumed time that the new Marathon game takes place, which is 2850 if we go by what's listed on the website. Now, the third Marathon game, Marathon Infinity, does alter the end of the second game, and its final screen does not reference these events like the end of the second game does. My current perspective is that the ending of Marathon Infinity does not necessarily retcon this information. Rather, that game is a psychological story about the player character's experience as the bridge between human and computer sentience is crossed. I believe that the story of the third game resolves the cosmic horror element introduced with the working Kakantur, while also expanding the universe in a metaphysical capacity that introduces alternate timelines. That could be more or less wrong, but I believe for the purposes of examining the lore in the context of the new game, this is the framework which Bungie seems to be working off of, and should serve to contextualize the canonical lore as we currently understand it. We'll also learn in the next videos on the ARG that the runners are actively operating in 2888, the time of the Marathon ARG, and have accessed the files that we're going to be looking through. This further calls into question what events from the original game have actually occurred in this timeline, but I will try to account for all canonical events that we have and speculate upon those as we don't have any concise timeline or reference point yet. So excuse further ramblings, please. Additionally, I will not be covering the process through which the ARG was unlocked and discovered unless it is relevant to the lore information that was obtained. If you would like to know how everything was figured out, please see the associated sources I spoke about earlier listed below. So, to begin, 2 pages appeared on the UESC.io page prior to when the website came fully online. Their appearance mimicked a modern take on a blank terminal screen as seen in the originals. Of note here is that the bottom right-hand corner on both of these pages contain this terminal address, 931.461.60231.14.vt920. I believe this is something akin to an IP address. This same address also appears on every terminal in the original trilogy in some variation. This leads me to believe that the transmission received through the ARG from this source are directly pulled from a net which is controlled or regulated exclusively by the UESC. The next page displayed on this website provided us with our first truly new lore for the UESC. Displayed prominently across the center of the screen was what appears to be the mission statement for the UESC. Welcome to the Unified Earth Space Council, the preeminent governing body for human expansion into the stars. Our organization is dedicated to ensuring the continued success of humanity's foray into space through rigorous protocols, diplomacy, and peacekeeping actions. This description succinctly describes the primary factor which contributed to the events of the original trilogy. The UESC's goals are colonial and effectively outline what their goal is going to be throughout the information we will obtain during the Marathon ARG. They want to expand humanity throughout the universe, and their actions are and will be dictated by this goal. When the page updated again, a new message was found as a banner across the top of the site. Due to unauthorized access, this terminal and password-protected folders within, the Unified Earth Space Council will commence a lockdown of any sensitive information effective 26 May 2888 at 1900 UTC. All evidence of breaches of sensitive information related to Project Goliath will be collected. This indicates that the information stored within this terminal is now located in a time the farthest into the future we have seen, except for when Durandal returns to Earth's solar system in 12,811. It also hints at a mysteriously sensitive Project Goliath. The information contained within should cover the events which we will be playing through, or at least portions of what was documented if that 2850 time frame from the official website is accurate to the in-game period. The events of the ARG do occur at the same calendar period as the release of the ARG, but in 2888. Ultimately, login information was located for the UESC website, which gave access to numerous files that included videos, emails, memos, and documents that revealed Project Goliath to be the codename for the UESC's mission to reclaim the Marathon with the salvage ship, the UESC Equanimity, which was initiated in 2795, likely started due to the loss of communication. Let's go through the files. The first UESC files we'll be going through are drafts of a memorandum for the Secretary General of the UESC. The memos are meant to outline the UESC's plan to reestablish control of the colony at Tau Ceti prior to the launch of Project Goliath in 2797. The first memo is dated 20 October 2795 and begins with a section of the memo that outlines the primary objective, that being to reestablish regular, reliable communications with New Cascadia, later referred to as the colony. Establish a dialogue with the current colony leadership, or alternately, re-establish contact with shipboard AI or colony AI. The subpoints indicate that if the loss of communication with the colony is due to an anti-government element, followed with MITA in parentheses, then all parties responsible for or in support of the act must be uncovered and neutralized, and that there is non-zero likelihood that the interruption in communications between the colony and Sol, Earth's solar system, originated in a possible rampancy event. Next, the secondary objectives are outlined, that being that the UESC must prioritize an announcement of additional steps to provide aid to the colony so as to dissuade further aggression by anti-government forces, while also signaling the strengths of the UESC to Mars, Luna, and their allies in the main belt, assumed separate colonies within the Sol system which the UESC controls at some level. I don't recall any reference to a Luna colony within the original games, but a colony on the moon would make sense given that we know from Marathon 1's terminal covering the history of Battleroids that wars were being fought in the late 2100s amongst governments of asteroid colonies. The UESC clearly has interests in ensuring the faith of these peoples, given the historical destruction at the hand of their failure to maintain peace within the Sol system. But, to be clear, these memos are written 600 years removed from this war, so contextually the sentiment regarding it may be the same as a government today considering the events of Braveheart in terms of deciding modern policy. The third section of the memo is referred to as direct actions, and seemingly outlines the primary story objectives that will be found within the game. Primarily, the UESC wants to determine the nature of disruption and secure the colony, i.e., what you'll be doing on runs when you aren't getting your own personal loot. Responding to possible rampant AI, they reveal that there are 11 possible AI that may be encountered. 3 on board the Marathon, we know these to be Durandal, Tycho, and Leela, all supposedly long gone from Tau Ceti at this point, and 8 planetside. 1 is even indicated to be a Chevalier-class AI, with one of the admins making notes on this draft of the memo indicating that it may be problematic to deal with. They even state directly there are a potential 11 hardened AI enclosures that will require their own particular solutions. Could these be some of the player story events referenced in the Vidoc? These hardened AI positions planetside could even be dungeon-esque areas that are housing rare loot and more dangerous enemies. The decommission of these AI is listed within the section as well as the express goal of the UESC. Clearly, they have little faith that the AIs will still be healthy after the many years they've been operational. Rampancy in Marathon is understood to be caused by the lifespan duration of the AI unit. As the longer an AI exists, the more information it acquires. This need for additional storage space is the theorized cause for rampancy, as it would theoretically need a planet-sized network to process its ever-growing computations. To handle this overload, it is believed that a pseudo-form of sentience is developed, and that emotions are the consequence of the AI's inability to handle this newfound excess in knowledge, thus requiring a shutdown of their systems. This is what happened to Traxxas 4, an AI which required the entire Martian net to be shut down so as to decommission it. It is also in this section that the admins making notes about the memo reveal that the UESC is seemingly aware that whatever caused the disruption is most likely not a natural event, as their simulations indicate a very low likelihood of this. The section ends with outlining the nuclear option by stating that in the unlikely event that the colony is found to be beyond recovery for any of the situations stated above, it may become necessary to destroy all surface assets and reassess potential sites for a new colony, followed by the administrators arguing over whether or not destroying the colony is a valid option, with the argument being that the planet is much larger than Earth, and finding suitable terrain could be easier than managing the threats within the colony. The third section also houses a potential manifest which outlines the great number of clones, cyborgs, and crew members slated to be on board the Equanimity, some of which are even later model Mjolnir cyborgs, surely ancestors in some way to the original 10 Mjolnir Mark IV cyborgs originally on board the Marathon. We also see a few times throughout the memo that Tau Ceti 4 is referred to as Argolis. I couldn't find any direct explanation of this, but keeping in line with the original trilogy's affinity for the repurposing of historical terms, Argolis was the name of a Greek peninsula, which is thought to be the longest continually inhabited town in Greece. Argolis was the foremost seat of power of the Mycenaeans that dominated Greece from around 1500 to 1200 BC. Although I cannot find a source for any other context to this, perhaps this hints at what the terrain of the map of the game will be like. This peninsula structure with a central ridgeline would provide many different areas for varied gameplay: ocean sides, mountaintops, plains, and dense forests. The fourth and final section of the initial memorandum is titled Local Indirect Action and describes the plan to implement a counterintelligence group of CIA-adjacent operatives who are expressly there to disrupt whatever government structure is left on Tau Ceti that doesn't align with the UESC. This would be accomplished via 3 platoon-strength units of specialized human intelligence operatives, with access to an additional 400 purpose-built second-generation clones, and will also incorporate recruitment of individuals on site. This version of the memo concludes with an ominous note from one of the administrators, stating that information came to light post-launch of the Marathon that led the UESC to believe that there were members of groups sympathetic to MITA amongst the original crew. Could this have been the Marathon's original science director, Bernard Strauss? The following 2 drafts of the memorandum undergoing alterations based largely upon notes placed on the original draft with the clear intent of softening the statement for release. For example, Section 2 in the first draft concludes with, "But the momentum of that advantage must be maintained by application of additional forces in a timely manner," whereas in the second draft it reads, "But the momentum of that advantage must be maintained by a timely manner by which we are able to commit those assets." The removal of the harsher language seems consistent with the UESC's goals, as they wish to obfuscate the more unsavory components of their actions, so as to sell its constituents on this reclamation mission while not raising any alarm. Of note, the second draft alters the title of combat and support personnel, opting rather for separate investigative, support, and security teams. The administrators who are adding the notes argue over the point of the investigative team, stating, "By the time our people get there, the statute of limitations will almost certainly have run out." Clearly, this rebranding would lead citizens and government officials to have a less exact understanding of how these personnel will be utilized. The second draft also alters the number of Mjolnir cyborgs deploying from 1 platoon to 48. A platoon, depending on the unit and military, will house somewhere between 20 to 50 individuals, so this quote-unquote reduction appears to be a way to further hide the number of combatant elements assigned to this mission, which one of the administrators makes note of when stating, This still feels like an unusually high number of combat personnel for what is essentially a humanitarian disaster relief mission. Interestingly, this back and forth continues between those making the edits, and it is stated that it should also be noted that although they share series nomenclature from earlier cyborg assets, these are not the Battleroids of old. This would explain how the large number of these Battleroid adjacent units isn't as absurd as it seems, as the small deployment of Battleroids when they were initially developed resulted in them killing, quote, almost everyone. The UESC is aware of the optics on this, even stating, if we even send one Mjolnir, there is no way the colony will see that as anything but overtly aggressive. It is also clarified in Section 4 of the second draft that this is a one-way 200-year trip. The administrators make note of this when stating, even if everything goes exactly as planned, it would be a 200-year round trip. What they return to after the amount of time would be just as alien as where they're headed, although the other isn't convinced of the acceptable nature of this. The fifth and final section of the second draft has now been titled Worst Case Scenario, but largely contains the same information as the Nuke and Pave section from Draft 1, indicating that the UESC is insistent upon maintaining the possibility that the colony may have to be destroyed if remedial action is less viable. They even reference a document from the Marathon Project that we could assume implies that a similar policy was in place for their operating procedures. The third draft continues this trend of softening the language to make it more palatable for a larger audience. Interestingly, they double down in some sections on their words against MITA. For example, Section 1.1 returns to using the language neutralized forthwith in respect to how the UESC will handle MITA collaborators. This seems to fall in line with how they wish for the public to perceive their strong position against rebel groups. Additionally, they remove references to the Mjolnir Mark IV cyborgs and opt for describing the security element as 48 purpose-built third-generation clones, Harpe M1-2. The final draft also includes a sixth section that discusses development of a new communication system to be positioned at 1 light-year intervals, 12 self-regulating communication relay satellites transmitting data via a gravitation wave neutrino modulator, purpose-built by the manufacturer decided by bid. This final draft also lacks any input or notes from the administrators and can be assumed to be the version that was released to the public. The next portion we will cover is the email chain located within the UESC website. The emails appear to be between the individuals drafting the memorandum that we just discussed, although the actual names of the people communicating are not listed. Rather, the chain is between LM_102009 and AS_101186. Now, the notes on the previous documents were listed as ASGMM and SILSGIH. We see a carryover between the AS appearing in both AS101186 and ASGMM. And L features in both the LM102009 and SILSGIH, but I don't believe these to be the same people. Of note is that both individuals in the email chain appear to be agreeing with many of the points made by ASGMM, who was questioning the militaristic nature of the Project Goliath mission. The individuals in the email chain also appeared to have a higher level of authority over the memo than the administrators who were making notes on the draft. Perhaps this chain is between the Secretary General in charge of Project Goliath mission and whoever is directly below them. The emails take place on the 23rd of October 2795, one day after the second draft we covered had been dated. They begin with LM messaging AS in reference to their worries about Project Goliath. LM notes that multiple drafts of the official memorandum are being drafted concurrently, and that some of the ships that are being drafted into the mission were set to be mothballed or removed from active service, one of which is supposed to be decommissioned due to new regulations that no longer permit the weapons on board to be used. Alas, the ship, referred to as the Electress, is currently planned to be used on Project Goliath. The first email also sees LM express worries over the two other, quote, groups, who are requesting to increase the number of ships included in the mission. Could these other entities be Traxxas and Sakaguchi? We will explore that in the videos covering those factions. The emails conclude with LM stating, at this point, the least surprising aspect of their current draft is that combat troops outnumber engineers and support personnel 4-1, clearly illustrating the true nature of the mission. AS responds only 4 hours later, stating that they too see the absurdity in the expressly militaristic requests, but offer a reasoning when stating perhaps they are proposing the obscene so that the merely outrageous seems reasonable, which would explain the justification for the mass amount of military-grade clones in the final draft of the memo, given that they are a step down from the formerly requested Mjolnir cyborgs. AS continues by insisting that the mission be stripped down to the bare minimums, 1 ship and minimum crew, which also aligns with the final draft of the Memorandum, which calls for the UESC Equanimity as the singular vessel involved. The email concludes with AS stating that chances are we can push this through before the Warhawks have a chance to react. I would believe that LM is referring to the more war-hungry members of the UESC or lobbying parties that are viewing Project Goliath as an expansionist money-making opportunity for the UESC. Surely the sources of this friction comes both internally and externally for the UESC, as the operation would result in large defense expenditures benefiting Sakaguchi and Traxxas, who develop many of the elements which will be used during Project Goliath. Also of note is that the term Warhawk is used to describe these individuals. This term also was historically used to refer to U.S. political agitators of the early 1800s who had qualms over trade agreements with Britain that they felt failed to allow for the U.S. to expand into the South and the West. These war-hungry sentiments are what ultimately fueled the War of 1812. The result of this war were new trade opportunities for the U.S. that allowed for easier expansion into the western aspect of North America. Surely the parallels between these historical figures and the parties interested in a militaristic expansion of humanity throughout the star systems and Tau Ceti hint at the intentions of these external entities and their opinions on Project Goliath. LM responds to this email by saying that he will look into the, quote, original proposal for the UIL's Rapid Reaction Group so that this operating procedure can be fitted into Project Goliath. AS responds to this by affirming this concept and further stating that as many cyborgs as possible should be removed from the manifest so that they may opt for clones as they are lighter and more adaptable and require less maintenance at around half the cost. Confirming our suspicions about the Mjolnir cyborgs from earlier, even with their removal from the final memo, we could still see these Mjolnir cyborgs show up on Tau Ceti, as their placement on board the Marathon was hidden as well, only revealed in the finale of the first game so that they could save the colony from the Four. Could secret stowaway cyborgs show up as bosses that drop rare loot? AS continues by asserting that the mission cannot be misconstrued as military in nature, as even if cyborgs are more accepted in the Sol system, those that left on the Marathon 500 years prior to the arrival of the Equanimity would still view them as weapons of mass destruction, thus escalating the conflict upon arrival. AS concludes by saying that to appease the Warhawks, they will lead them on with talks of security personnel being sent at a later date, only to tie up the requests in the future to mitigate their impact on the project. The next file is a manifest for the Equanimity, and I think it's important to note at this point that equanimity means mental calmness, composure, and evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. So clearly everything we have seen so far is an attempt by the UESC to make this look like a wholly justified rescue mission, while internally viewing it as most likely a rebellion war that they will be fighting at a great distance. Nonetheless, the manifest notes that the Equanimity is a Kingfisher-class salvage and rescue craft with an endurance of 150 years. This further solidifies that the nature of this mission does not account for a return journey, as it is referred to as a 200-year round trip earlier. This does create some conflict with our current presumed timeline. If the terminal dates in the ARG indicate that the year is 2888 and the website indicates the date of 2850, then how did the Equanimity reach Tau Ceti by either of those dates, both being under the 100-year window? If it hasn't yet, or reaches it at a date after this, then that would eliminate the presumed Marathon 2 timeline, as the Svit Kur were said to have defeated the Four with the human fleet in 2881. Perhaps the Equanimity is stripped down and upgraded to achieve a faster speed with the advancements of technology and Sol in the last 300 years since the Marathon's deployment. Or perhaps the timeline is being altered. The manifest annotates the many elements and clones that will be on board, as well as stating that there will be permanent accommodations for 150 persons plus crew. The manifest seemingly doesn't include any reference to nuclear armaments that I can see, although it is listed in the final draft of the memo that it, quote, may become necessary to destroy all surface assets. This would seemingly be completed via nuclear means, as listed in earlier drafts, and yet it is not seen on the manifest. This could indicate that the manifest has been tampered with or changed to hide some of the assets which will be on board, once again similar to the manifest for the Marathon. Next, we will look at another apparent memo that was found within the UESC files. This memo was written by Dr. Bernard H. Strauss, listed here as head of AI management and systems improvement for Project Marathon. In the original trilogy, I believe he is referred to as the Marathon's first science director. He makes the trip on the Marathon in stasis, and in the first game, Durandal even has you searching for him on board the Marathon and the 4 ship. Tycho, one of the other AIs originally on board the Marathon, refers to Strauss as having abused Durandal, leading some to believe that Strauss may have intentionally caused Durandal's rampancy for some nefarious reason, possibly at the request of Mida so as to attack the Marathon project. A terminal from the original trilogy also reveals that Bernard was aware of the Mjolnir cyborgs on board the Marathon prior to its launch, even though the president of the UESC at the time had no knowledge of this. Bernard is not found within the original trilogy, and it is noted in the second game that he had died, without any explanation as to how this information was specifically verified. Now, onto the letter. The date given at the top of the letter is 17 Columba 459. This date is Mars calendar for November 13th, 2472, 3 days prior to the launch of the Marathon. The letter provides a brief explanation of rampancy that largely follows what we discussed earlier, further stating that given enough time, any learning system will grow in complexity beyond its original design parameters. This expansion will result in, quote, aberrant behavior. If not corrected, this aberrant behavior will develop into what is commonly referred to as rampancy. Strauss also explains that there is a remedy to this problem, as recompiling the AI resets them to an appropriate and functional state. The writing continues with a section about how to handle an AI in the event that it is too late to stop it from becoming rampant. Strauss starts with advising that it is policy to not engage or communicate with an AI suspected of rampancy, following with, if interacting with the AI is unavoidable, keep interactions to a minimum, limit the number of words used, issue orders, keep every interaction transactional. If it attempts to engage in casual or more conversational dialogue patterns, disengage immediately. Upon confirmation of an AI's rampancy, their logic core should be secured for study. It must be physically decoupled and isolated, and if not destroyed entirely, it must be labeled as, quote, malicious_C5 and quarantined. The letter contains a list of the AI on board the Marathon, and this includes the 3 AI from the original trilogy and the 8 meant for the colony. Assumedly, their logic cores remained in storage and not operational prior to the arrival at Tau Ceti, so as to mitigate rampancy potential. I will now read the descriptions offered for the colony AI, as I believe these AI are being fleshed out with characteristics because they're going to be relevant in the upcoming game as enemies or characters that will have an impact on the colony you'll be exploring. So the first one is AR. He's described as a benevolent autocrat, no-nonsense problem solver, classic patriarchal authority figure. BA, problem solver, confident, bordering on boastful, may need to go on to accelerated recompile cycle, inform the science and engineering crew. DA, dutiful, diligent, motivated, always puts others ahead of self, may need to address this at some point. GA, compassionate, empathetic, and transparent, perhaps our greatest achievement to date, will most likely need to be moved to an accelerated recompile cycle at some point. IC, motivated, assertive, proactive, and will need to keep isolated from Tycho or establish hierarchy at outset, inform science engineering of situation. Maybe this AI had some sort of relationship with Tycho, or they became too friendly in a manner that might accelerate rampancy. JO, resilient, optimistic, patient, the colony AI for defense and training. I've also seen that potentially this AI's name could be Joyous, which is somehow tied to the Durandal and Cortana names in mythology and ancient history. LI, focused, assertive, good communicator, designated candidate for colony oversight during second phase. And finally, NA, proactive, goal-oriented, committed, may need to be reminded from time to time about their primary function, inform the science and engineering crew. These short personality descriptions could explain certain aspects of the game world depending on what area the AI is utilized in. I could see NA controlling an underground science facility, possibly lining the halls with robots while caught in some goal it has developed for itself over the years. While GA may be an emotional wreck, their area run down as its compassion resulted in years of mourning after the failure of the colony. These all sound like dynamic characters that could alter the game world in unique ways. Strauss concludes the letter with, "Let's ensure that the things we can control remain in our control." Well, I guess that didn't go exactly to plan. The final file we have access to is a letter from Bethany R. Montenegro Sincara, the commander of Project Goliath, to the brave souls of the Equanimity, dated 19 July 2797. The letter explains that the crew of the Equanimity should be prepared for the vast array of possible reasons for Project Marathon's loss of communication. It reads rather plainly as a hoorah morale builder from a commander that clarifies the dangerous nature of their mission and the many variables that are unaccounted for. Finally, we're going to be taking a look at the 5 UESC videos. These short videos pull clips from the Vidoc and trailer and feature a UESC intro that makes it appear as official UESC evidence. These videos were found within the same directory, Futurum, as the other files we have looked at so far, but notably the video which features Christopher Barrett, Marathon's game director, is found in a separate folder from the others. The location of his video is next to all of the promotional wallpapers that were released in the ARG. This doesn't appear to be in-universe and utilizes a 2023 date separate from the rest of the videos. So we'll start with evidence file 1842, unknown presence. The first thing to note here is that the date is 5/25/2893. The video features the same shot of the SFIT compiler from the teaser trailer. This seems to indicate that runners are still active at this time period, which is seemingly the farthest date into the future that we have yet. The video also notes that it was filmed at a 13x zoom, although apparently occurring indoors. Was this possibly captured via a drone? The video also annotated the glowing circular area where the SFIT would expel their projectiles from in the original trilogy, describing the energy source as unknown while labeling them non-human combatants. The video is then cut off, with the message "camera lost" appearing on screen. The next video, evidence file 1843, titled Site Survey, provides the same date as the prior video and features all of the space shots from the Marathon teaser trailer. This video identifies the vessel as the UESC Marathon, which seems to discredit my prior thoughts from my trailer analysis video, where I suggested that the vessel housed within the moon hull was a new ship designed to reappropriate the destroyed Marathon, and seems to confirm that it is just a redesign of the Marathon ship. The video also indicates that a scan of the vessel revealed no signs of life on board, and that an active debris field exists around the vessel. Could this be a location you visit in the new game? Or will debris from the Marathon be falling towards Tau Ceti, causing meteor-style events in-game? The next video, evidence file 1844, titled The Colony, shows the videos of Tau Ceti as seen from space. This camera perspective is labeled as a UESC RecSat, showing some of the capabilities Equanimity has and retains the same date as the other videos. This video does not seem to reveal much new information, but does label Tau Ceti 4 as an Earth-like planet with an inhospitable low oxygen atmosphere. The next video, evidence file 1845, Runner Threat Assess, is easily my favorite. This features the same date as the other videos and displays the video of the runners from the trailer. It labels this camera as a UESC security feed and names the iconic runners we see in the end of the trailer. The sniper is referred to as White Rabbit, badass, and indicated to be a Sakaguchi S-series clone. We'll cover the series of clones in the video about Sakaguchi. It also names the two runners in the rear as Brill and Patch, affiliating all of them with the company Traxxas, which leads me to believe that the clone we see earlier in the trailer, who has the lipstick in the shape of the Traxxas logo, could have been White Rabbit. The final and seemingly out-of-universe video is evidence file 1841, Director Deposition. This video has Christopher Barrett basically breaking down what you'll be doing in the new Marathon and what mysteries you'll uncover. But given that's what we just talked about for the past however long this video is now, I don't see the need in going over it. So we made it. As far as I am aware, this is what has been revealed about the UESC from the ARG. I absolutely could have missed some things or be entirely unaware of something, but I think we covered the majority of relevant lore that was uncovered. I believe the key takeaway here is that the UESC is a powerful government which is seeking to reclaim control over the lost colony at Tau Ceti. They will achieve this goal by deploying the UESC Equanimity with a suite of combat-capable personnel, clones, and equipment. They appear to be obfuscating the fact that they believe something more sinister has occurred while simultaneously preparing for a war with an anti-government entity assumed to be MITA. We also learn that they have a visual assessment of the ground forces and Marathon and are aware that alien life is present. There's also a tension between the government, both internally and externally, between those who wish to capitalize on this situation and those who wish to protect the colonists. This play between numerous political forces is something I love to see coming back from the original trilogy, and I can't wait to learn more about what all these groups are up to. Additionally, it seems that this is either a new timeline that is inconsistent with what was provided in the Marathon 2 ending, or this timeline is representative of the final timeline in Marathon Infinity. Either way, the UESC seem to be wholly unaware of alien life a decade after they were presumed to have defeated the Four with the Sphit-Kur. I can't wait to see what else was revealed in this ARG. Once again, I want to say thank you to everyone who worked to put this information together, and to Bungie for giving us something to do while we wait for the game. If you're interested in reading this for yourself, please check out the sources in the description. Thanks to everyone who is liking, commenting, and subscribing. I really appreciate it. If you would like to see more videos like this, and you've made it to this point in the video, please consider subscribing so that we can build a fun community around this game here. Alright, let me know which faction from the ARG you would like to see covered next, and have a good day, everybody. Bye.